A former Labour MP facing jail for threatening to throw acid over a suspected love rival reportedly told her supporters, "I'm a black woman in a white court." Leicester East MP Claudia Webbe, who has been suspended from the Labour Party and is now an independent, was convicted earlier this month of harassment against suspected love rival Michelle Merritt. Miss Webb, 56, will be sentenced on November 4th, but was warned she could face prison. But in a message apparently sent to her supporters before the verdict, the MP, who denied the harassment claims, said, "I'm a black woman in a white court facing a white system and white prosecutors." White. "I have been deliberately targeted because I am vulnerable." It continued, "I know first it."
It's continued.
The Daily Mail is referring to Claudia Webbe as it. "I know firsthand the sexism and racism institutions and media use to vilify black women." That's from the Daily Mail. Thoughts?
Oh my God!
I love how she's synonymizing being black with being vulnerable.
It's just this obvious grift. I mean, how do people take this seriously? How does anyone take this seriously?
Yeah. Well, Diane Abbott and Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell have taken her seriously.
It's race baiting. It's race grifting.
It
is in fact racist.
It's the worst kind of gutter, virtue signalling, race baiting politics.
So, I mean, for people unfamiliar, you're lucky. But for people unfamiliar, Claudia Webbe was a Labour Party MP, Member of Parliament, for Leicester East, into which she was parachuted under Corbyn after Keith Vaz, her predecessor and chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, was caught giving drugs to rent boys whilst being a happily married man. And Claudia Webbe was a councillor in Islington, so having no previous connection with Leicester East, parachuted into Leicester East, stood as their MP. A majority was slashed from Keith Vaz's 22,000 to 6,000, which means that that's quite a small majority at this point. And now, given what's happened to her, it could well be lost the next time that it comes to a vote. There should be a by-election quite soon, given that she has been convicted, and she's been convicted of harassing a woman who was having an affair with her husband over the course of the last year, including threatening to throw acid over her, which is not a particularly pleasant thing to do.
It's also
and she says she's
specific.
the victim in this. But the court found, this white court apparently, nevertheless, it heard her testimony, and she was given character witnesses by Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell, Diane Abbott, all the tripartite of doom that is the
people least qualified to give character witnesses.
Well, the people you least want on your side to give character witnesses. And the court found that her testimony was inconsistent and in large parts incoherent and unlikely, and the judge found that she was dishonest.
I wonder how she pronounced her words on stage.
Oh, well, she famously, of course,
she did confuse Belarus with Belarus. I'm wondering if she said, "I didn't threaten to throw acid on the woman."
Well, maybe she meant something else. Yeah, it was like throw a book on Sargon of Akkad. No, she threatened to her, and one of the best lines that came out of this was that she was asked at some point whether she was mad, because
by the judge.
I think by the judge, because her testimony was, she said she wasn't abusing this woman because of the affair. She was concerned that the woman having an affair with her husband was breaking COVID rules, and so she was just asking her to obey the rules for coronavirus.
Excuse me, I just want to check that you're not breaking the COVID rules. If
Carry on banging my husband if you like.
I'm going to throw acid in your face.
Carry on banging my husband, just do it within the coronavirus guidelines, please. Apparently was it. So this was partly what prompted, I think it was the judge, or it was a cross-examiner, to ask, "Are you mad?" The best line that came out of this was, "I'm not mad, I'm a member of parliament." Which is...
she's unintentionally funny.
Distinction without a difference. Anyway, so now she's claiming that the fact that she has been found guilty of harassing women and threatening to harass it over her means that she is a victim of a racist court system.
Oh dear.
And it's just... So the Labour Party has suspended the whip from her because she was going through this court process. And that means that though she is still a Labour Party member, I think she's not a member of Parliament for the Labour Party anymore. She sits as an independent until this is
very
resolved.
much doubt the whip will be restored.
Well, yeah, you'd say that, but then it's the Labour Party, so who knows at this point. Given that also she was last week snapped in a photo shoot alongside fellow Labour MPs. This is after the judgment was handed down. And she was standing with Labour MPs, campaigning with Labour MPs, having a photo shoot with Labour MPs. So,
Wasn't she one of the minority selection things? You know, she was selected to be an MP purely on the basis of her race.
I think probably is the case. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that in itself, it just goes to show as positive discrimination. Essentially, it just goes to show the kind of caliber that you're likely a politician that you're likely to get from such a process, and b the well, yeah, just that the kind of person you're likely to produce. It's just the racialization of not just politics but society, as a result of God knows what. I mean, decades of sort of creeping Gramscian left-wing takeovers of various institutions, and more recently, especially after Black Lives Matter have really come to the fore. Because people forget that back in sort of 2016-15, Black Lives Matter was still about. I was living in Woolwich at the time, and I didn't see it for myself, but I saw it in the news. Black Lives Matter, as it was then, and nobody had heard of them, ran out onto one of the runways at the airport.
Yeah, I saw that they were protesting environmental racism, they called it.
Yeah, and they ran out in front of the runway, and this reporter filmed this black woman getting out of her car to catch a plane and said, "You can't catch your plane, it's been delayed by Black Lives Matter." And she said something like, "Black Lives who?" The fuck am I?
This is the proper response.
Yes. I think particularly in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, I suppose you could say, the racialization of everything by a particular minority, using Twitter as a loudspeaker, and politicians have lapped this up, and Claudia Webbe is basically the result of this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean,
and she maybe she's right, maybe she is a victim in a way. I mean, she's obviously too thick to understand what's going on, and she is a product. She is a product of this sort of zeitgeist.
Yeah.
So she genuinely does think she's a victim in virtue of the fact that she's black.
And it's whether she thinks this or not, I'm not sure, because whether she thinks is open to question. But she certainly says this because there's perceived to be an advantage to saying it. Race baiting has in the past worked. I mean, this is the structure by which the Labour Party does things.
It's quite refreshing to see that tactic having been essentially rejected.
Well,
it's
inevitably also going to suffer diminishing returns because it becomes it's an obvious grift. Even people who might otherwise be inclined to support the Labour Party, as it used to be, can see that this is an obvious grift. This is a woman who's been accused of harassing a woman and threatening to throw acid over her, and now she's saying, "Oh, well, you only found I'm guilty because I'm black." Well, no. And also, I don't know what race the person who was cheating on her husband was, but if that person wasn't white, then she's also herself victimising someone who is black or minority. But no, it's a white court system that's produced this. This is such obvious nonsense, and most people can see through it. But there's still enough people, especially on the left and in the Labour Party, for this defence to have some kind of currency, which is why it's so often the recourse. But it's evidence of the fact that none of this has ever worked. It creates this race to the bottom, racial selection systems, just like gender selection systems, which the Labour Party, both of which the Labour Party uses to select its candidates. Chuck people like. What's her name?
Claudia
Webbe. Chuck people
she
like
is
Claudia,
forgettable.
I wish she was more forgettable. They chuck people like Claudia Webbe into seats they've never been to, they've never visited, over the local candidate who was the preferred nominee of the local party,
candidate,
on the basis of affirmative action, effectively. And what this has produced is a Labour Party which is stuffed to the gills with talentless morons who are there solely on the strength of immutable characteristics and not on the strength of talent or merit. The Conservative Party has always disavowed any kind of quota system, for instance, for female MPs, and also for diverse MPs, and as a result has had 2 female prime ministers. The Labour Party has never elected a female leader, never mind had a female prime minister. The Conservative Party has the most diverse cabinet in the history of the country, and there are more black Tory MPs, I think, at the moment than there are Labour Tory MPs. Labour Tory MPs. Black Labour MPs. I think that is the case, certainly on the front bench.
Well, if it isn't, then it's surely close to being the case.
Yeah, it's certainly the case on the front bench. And they've achieved all of this.
Kemi Badenoch, anyone?
Yeah. Well, Kemi Badenoch was great. So
she's fantastic.
She's
what Claudia Webbe should be.
Well, she's the kind of calibre that the Labour Party would elect if they got rid of affirmative action.
If they conceded to the principle of meritocracy, which they consider
as opposed to
sort of part of a pyramid of oppression or something.
Racial segregation, which is what is the modern anti-racist line. But then Kemi Badenoch, there's a speech of hers uncovered. She was at a debate against Kimberly Crenshaw, I think it was, who founded critical race theory, or is one of the founders of that particular school of thought. And this is before Badenoch was a front bencher, so she was being a bit more open about things than she might be now. She is on the front bench. And she was basically saying that it's a real tragedy that so many black people are represented in Parliament and in the media by idiots like Diane Abbott. I think she did actually mention Diane Abbott. It gives the impression that all black people are as of low calibre of people like Diane Abbott and I've forgotten the name again. Claudia Webbe. When this is purely the result of affirmative action policies coming through. And actually, if you really want to get the best of Black Britain to the fore, then doing away with policies to get Black Britain to the fore is a good idea.
Yeah.
But here we have Claudia Webbe still doing her thing and disgracing an entire political party and also an entire section of the community for whom she claims to speak.
It's just the absurdity as well of even... Imagine what kind of a person you have to be to complain to the judges and or about the judge and about the court by which you have been convicted that it was white. Imagine being so sordid to notice that kind of a thing.
I imagine see what the outrage would be.
Well, exactly. I imagine she genuinely thinks that the justice system in this country actually operates along racial lines. She's probably got no conception whatsoever of the fact that the justice system in this country, for better or worse, because there's no such thing as utopia, operates according to the principles of impartial justice, no matter your immutable characteristics.
And if you want to avoid being convicted as a black person in the white court,
don't threaten to throw acid on someone's face. Yes.
Seems a sensible way to start.
Indeed.